So I have a question that came up as you were talking. Did you feel any like tension or judgment towards you being different over there, like in everyday living?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Mm.
Do you?
Um,
So a lot of times when I've heard people talk about like Japan, they're like, uh, we might get a little spicy now, right? They're like, oh, they're not racist. They just see you as a foreigner.
Mm.
Like, so their treatment of you is like you're a foreigner. It's not because you're a black person. Is that true or is that a myth?
no, it's definitely a myth. Um, because as a foreigner, you are automatically second class. Um, so like you don't have the same rights and protections as a Japanese citizen. So yeah, no, it's um I would say it constitutes, full racism. And it's not necessarily intentional. I don't think it's malicious
Mm.
um, most of the time, but it's definitely, I would consider it racism. Um,
Okay.
yeah. Like, my absolute favorite thing was I would walk into a convenience store or something and, you know, ask for something or some assistance in, grammatically correct Japanese
Yeah.
and get the answer, I don't speak English. And it's like, well, if you were listening at all and not just, staring at me, then I think you would know that I was not speaking English. So there's not really a communication barrier here.
Damn.
Yikes.
I feel like that is malicious though.
Well, I think part of it is just like they're scared shitless. Like
Mm.
somebody who doesn't look like them comes in and they're not sure if they're going to be able to communicate. And communication is a huge part of, Japanese society.
Mhm.
It's a very high context language. I don't know if you guys know like high context and low context languages, but
Teach us.
um, okay. So high context is mostly like most things are like metaphors and euphemisms. So you have to really, really know what you're saying or what you're talking about,
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
or what somebody else is saying to like really get the full message. So you know, um, they're just worried that like their culture or their mannerisms are not going to get through to me because English is it's like mid context, but it's relatively low compared to Japanese.
Yeah, understandable.
Mm.
Are there any words or phrases that are super close that you have to be careful about in general?
um yes and no. I mean, there's not really any um specific examples that I can think of off the top of my head,
That's fine.
but there's a lot of synonyms and homonyms.
Mm.
Um, so you just have to be pretty careful.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess homophones, yeah, homophones
Mhm.
as well. So like you just have to be careful about um, intonation because sometimes like where you put the stress on a word
Mhm.
um, makes the entire difference as to what word is um,
Most definitely.
yeah, understood. And then
Mm.
again, it's mostly based on context.
Mm.
So for the most part, like if you go in speaking simple Japanese, like most people will get what you're saying, but a lot of people will kind of like overthink what you're saying and
Mm.
turn it into something that like it really wasn't.
Oh, so it's like in English where you get into an argument with somebody and they read in between lines that don't exist, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I guess it's all
But to the
languages.
point where like they just can't understand anything. They're just like, wait, that didn't make any sense because I'm expecting something more complicated.
Mm.
So
Mm.
That's cool.
Sounds like a language that caused a lot of miscommunication.
Oh yeah. My
You
favorite
know,
thing was I had a teacher who sat right across from me at work, and she was kind of studying English, and her textbook was completely in English, and it just had like little essays on um, topics related to grammar and culture in Japan.
Mhm.
So one chapter was all about kind of the high context nature of Japanese language. And so it started out with like, well, if your neighbor says like, "Oh, we were just outside enjoying the cherry blossoms
Mhm.
from your tree," like one of the meanings, and probably the meaning that most people would understand is your tree is overhanging into my garden. You need to come and trim that.
oh wow.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and so like the whole essay goes through and just kind of like I don't know, it kind of bashes the Japanese language, I
Mm,
felt. But then at the end, it's like sometimes people are just enjoying cherry blossoms.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, so basically,
Like y'all take a breather, calm down,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
it sounds like some low-key sarcasm in there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most Japanese people would say, like, oh no, Japanese people aren't sarcastic. But when that's how you communicate,
Hmm.
90% of the time, then
Yeah.
That kind of explains a lot more. Like I'm understanding a little bit more because I've seen. I mean, granted, a lot of my experiences with the Japanese culture is through media,
mhm,
but I've seen like how like people like kind of avoid eye contact and stuff like that, or they seem like really shy people in general. And I wonder if part of it is due to the language just on its own,
Mm,
because you want to avoid any miscommunication or any drama, so you kind of are more like hesitant to communicate.
mm,
yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And the culture has a very like rigid hierarchy as well. So like you don't want to be seen as overstepping boundaries.
mm.
Um, Even if it's somebody who's, technically on your same level. Um, you don't know that. So yeah.
I have one more question about this. Um, is the written language easier than the spoken language?
Oh, hell no.
So if you
No.
read something, is it easier to understand than if you say something, or is it like the same complexity?
Um, well, let's put it this way. I can't read in Japan. I
Mm,
am completely illiterate,
mhm,
basically. So, that kind of like gives you a bit of a perspective. Like you need at least a working knowledge of at least 2,000 characters, I think, to
Oof.
kind of like function
yeah,
in Japan. Plus, there's three pretty different writing systems.
golly.
So, it's just, and they're all like used together.
Mhm,
So, yeah, it's pretty difficult. And then like that's just structurally.
yeah,
When it comes to like semantics and context and things like that, it only gets more complicated.
that's
And
wild.
then you don't have like the physical, like body language or tones
Mm,
and things like
Hmm.
that you would get if you were actually talking to a person. So it's much more difficult, I think.
gotcha, gotcha. Okay,
Oof.
cool.
Wow.